Good morning, student. Today in theme 9, we will discuss our last topics, the imperial officials, then beyond the frontiers, and the last one, questioning from formal religion. First of all, I will tell you about the imperial officials, recruitment and rank. One important pillar of the Mughal state was its corps of officers. As you know that the whole work was done by the officers. In this time you also see that the ministers never did the whole work. They were depend upon on that time and in this time also on their officers. So that on that time at the Mughal period, the king was depend upon their officers. In Akbar's imperial services, the Turani Iranian nobles were present from the earliest phase of carving out of political domain. Many had accompanied the Humayuns, other migrated later to the Mughal court. Yeah, so at the time of the Akbars and then the Humayuns, the Turani and the Iranian nobles, they were also giving their services in the Mughal court. Two ruling groups of the Indian origin entered the imperial services from 1560 onward, the Rajputs and the Indian Muslims. The first to join was a Rajput chief, Raja Behrmal of Amber, to whose the daughter Akbar got married, and members of Hindu caste inclined towards education and accountancy was very on that time were also promoted. A famous example being Akbar's finance minister Raja Todarmal. He gave his services in the Mughal court under Akbar. The imperial officials, Iranian gained high offices under Jahangir, whose politically influential queen Noor Jahan, she was also an Iranian. The keeping of exact and detailed records was a major concern of the Mughal administration. The Mir Bakshi supervised the corps of court writers and who recorded all the applications and documents presented to the court and all the imperial orders. So this work had to be done by the Mir Bakshi, okay, to keeping all the records, imperial orders, all the whole work was going under the Mir Bakshi. News reports and important official documents traveled across the length and breadth of the region under the Mughal rule by the imperial post. Now, around the clock relays the foot runners. They carried the paper rolled up in bamboo containers, and the emperor received reports from even distant provincial capital within a few days. So in this way, they were also the communication was, if we are saying that was going on through this way. The foot runners, they were also the foot runners were used, okay, to communicate their messages from one province to another. The division of functions established at the center was replicated in the provinces or subas, where the minister had their corresponding subordinates like the Diwan, Bakshi and the Sadar. So with the help of these subordinates, the ministers also did their all type of the work. The head of the provincial administration was the governor or subedar, who reported directly to the emperor. Then the sarkars, into which each suba was divided, often overlapped with the reduction of Faujdar or commandants who deployed with contingents of heavy cavalry and the musketeers in the district. So Faujdar also look after each subas or to protect each subas. The local administration was looked after at the level of the Pargana or sub district by three semi hereditary officers: the Kanungo, keeper of the revenue records, then Chaudhary, in charge of the revenue collection, and the Qazi, who also solve all type of the problems or conflicts in between the people. Each department of the administration maintained a large support staff of clerks, accountants, auditors, messengers, and other functionaries who were technically qualified officials, functioning in accordance with standardized rules and procedures and generating copious written order and the records. So then each department of the administration was maintained by a large support of by all these people on that time. The Persian was made the language of administration throughout, but local language were also used for the village accounts. So the official language was the Persian. The whole work was done by the Persian language. The relationship between the local landed magnates and the jamidars and the representatives of the Mughal emperor was sometime marked by conflicts over authority and share of their resources. Then we also see the conflicts in between the local land or the jamidars and the representatives of the Mughals, on which they were conflict on the share of the resources. The jamidar often succeeded in mobilizing peasant support against the state. So in this conflict mostly we see the jamidars were succeeded because the peasants, because they were getting the support from the peasant against the ruler or the state. Now beyond the frontier, the diplomatic relations. Contemporary historians provide accounts of diplomatic relationship of the and conflicts with the neighboring political powers. These reflect some tension and political rivalry arising from competing regional interest. So on that time, the Mughals, they had the conflict. Uh, here you see in the first point the Safavid and the Kandahar. Now in detail I am describe it. The political and the diplomatic relation between the Mughal kings and the neighboring countries of the Iran and Turan hinged on the control of the frontier defined by the Hindu Kush mountain. This separated Afghanistan from the regions of the Iran and Central Asia. All conquerors who sought to make their way into the Indian subcontinent had to cross the Hindu Kush to have access to the North India. A constant aim of the Mughal policy was to ward off the potential danger by controlling strategy. Outposts, notably the Kabul and Kandahar. Kandahar was the bone of the contention between the Safavids and the Mughals. So the fortress town had initially been in the possession of Humayun, reconquered in 1595 by the Akbar. Then Safavid courts retained diplomatic relation with the Mughals. It continued to stake claim to Kandahar. In 1613, Jahangir sent a diplomatic envoy to the court of Shah Abbas to plead the Mughal case for retaining Kandahar, but this mission was failed. In winter 1622, a Persian army besieged Kandahar. An ill prepared Mughal garrison was defeated and had to surrender the fortress and the city to the Safavids. So in this way, this Kandahar was went in the hand of the from the Mughals to the Safavis. Now the Ottomans, the pilgrimage and the trade. The relationship between the Mughals and the Ottomans was marked by concern to ensure free movement for merchants and pilgrims in the territories under the Ottoman control. This was especially true for the Hajis. That part of the Ottoman Arabia where the important pilgrim center of Mecca and Medina were located. The Mughal emperor usually combined religion and commerce by exporting valuable merchandise to Aden and Mocha, both Red seaports, and distributing the proceeds of the sales in charity to the keepers of shrines and religious men there. However, when the Aurangzeb discovered cases of appropriation of the funds sent to the Arabia, he favored their distribution in India, which he thought was as much a house of gold as Makkah. Then the Jews at the Mughal court. Following the discovery of a direct sea route to India at the end of the 15th century, the Portuguese merchant established a network of trading stations in the coastal cities. The Portuguese king was also interested in the propagation of Christianity with the help of missionaries of the Society of Jews. The Christian missions to India during the 16th century were part of this process of trade and empire buildings. Akbar was very curious about the Christianity and dispatched an embassy to Goa to invite Jewish priests because Akbar also wanted to getting the knowledge about the Christianity. The Jewish accounts are based on the personal observation, shed light on the character and mind of the emperor. At public assemblies of the Jewish they were assigned places in close proximity to Akbar's throne. They accompanied him on his campaign, then tutored his children, and were often companies to in his leisure time. So in this way, the Akbar was too much impressed from the Jewish people on that time. Now the questioning former religion. Akbar's quest for religious knowledge led to the interfaith debates in the Ibadat Khana at Fatehpur Sikri between learned Muslim, Hindu, Jains, Parsis and Christians. Akbar's religious views matured as he queried scholars of different religions and sects and gathered knowledge about their doctrine. And his interaction with various religions and theologians had convinced him that despite their differences, all religions had several good practices which he sought to combine into a new religious movement that was called the Deen-e-Ilahi. So, what was the Deen-e-Ilahi? Deen-e-Ilahi is like as the combination of all the good points of the different religion, because that on that time the different type of the people, maybe the Muslim, Hindu, Jain, Parsis, Christian, they were lived in our India. So Akbar, so Deen-e-Ilahi, so this movement, or we are saying that this was an ideology which was started by the Akbar. Then when all the people, when they listen this the views or this ideology, so they also thought that one also belonged to their own religion, because Deen-e-Ilahi was the combination of all good points of all the religions. Learning about the religion, Ibadat Khana. we already discussed that in our last video. Ibadat Khana, hall of worship in the Fatehpur Sikri, held debates and discussion with religious teachers in the Ibadat Khana. Then Deen-e Ilahi. Deen-e Ilahi, here are the three main views about the Deen-e Ilahi. One goat, simple path, worship the sun and fire. Then Sulhe-Kul, universal peace. We already discussed about this in our last video about the Sulhe-Kul policy of the Akbar. Here are the some major Mughal chronicles and their memories. In 1530, manuscript of Babur's memories in Turkish saved from the storm becomes part of the family collection of the Timurid. Then 1587, Gulbadan Begum began to write the Humayunnama. 1589, Babur's memory translated into Persian as Babarnama. 1589 to 1602, Abul Fazl work on the Akbarnama. 1605 to 22, Jahangir writes his memories, the Jahangirnama. 1639 to 147, Lahori composes the first two daftars of the Bashahnama. 1650, Muhammad Waris began to chronicle the third decades of the Shah Jahan reign. Then 1668, Alamgirnama, a history of the first 10 years of the Aurangzeb reign compiled by the Muhammad Kazim. Okay student, thank you. Our syllabus up to the second book is completed with this video, and our two books are complete totally. Syllabus is completed, and our half yearly exam is based on these two books. Thank you student.